Hi, I'm John Little, and this is the ShockCast for Saturday, June 16th, 2018, for the article on the article from Friday on Omega Shock, from Friday, June 15th, 2018. Boy, I'm great at video, aren't I? It's about why Israel matters with Dr. Randall Smith. With all the horrifying events that are bearing down upon us, you desperately need to understand why Israel is at the center of it all. And it is the center of it all. Please understand that we are at the end of history. Everything that has gone before has been leading up to this moment in time. Yes, the war was won 2,000 years ago, but the fighting isn't over. And I was deeply impressed by a presentation given by a neighbor of mine from Jerusalem. This presentation illustrates the point, and you need to get that point to navigate the events that we are about to experience. When I look over the landscape of events, I see so much to talk about that it is often hard to choose what to write and say. And this week was full of incredible events that have exploded across the headlines, and I see signs of some of the things that I have been yelling about coming to pass. That would normally give me more to write about than I could pack into a single article. But what I'm about to show you is bigger than all of that combined. And yes, I really mean that. On Monday, Karen J. sent me a link. I tend to trust Karen's research, even though I can only share a fraction of what she sends me. That link turned out to be a video titled 2018 0609, June 9th, Dr. Randall Smith, Session 1, Why Israel Matters. When I saw his face, I thought, hey, I know this guy. And sure enough, he lived in my neighborhood of Gilo, the southernmost neighborhood of Jerusalem, and went through the Second Intifada like I did. And his presentation is exactly what I would have given if I had been standing where he was standing with the job of presenting what he was given to present. In fact, I think that he did it much better than I would have. So if you need someone to talk about why Israel matters, don't call me. Call Randall Smith. He knows why Israel matters, and he did an excellent job of telling us why. In fact, if I was looking for a church to attend, I would stop looking when I hit his church. He's that good. And yes, I know that he's a dispensationalist, which means that I would bug him to death about why I think that he's wrong in his eschatology. I'm just a joy to be around, aren't I? Anything that you get wrong in your sermon, I'm going to tell you. Well, maybe I'll be nice. Anyway, since that was session 1, I knew that there had to be a session 2, and here it is. It's the same kind of link. It just says, although this one says, he who has ears to hear. Which was an interesting bit of foreshadowing, if I say so myself. As I was listening to him speak, I was nodding and saying amen, as I did in the first one, to everything that he said. I was a bundle of enthusiasm for session 1 and session 2 until I heard him say something that made me squawk in shock and consternation. And I'm afraid that my squawking kind of diverted the article that I wanted to write, which I'm afraid that you're about to see the diversion. So let me roll back a bit to the point where he started the segment that made me howl. In fact, I will inject that one brief point right here, right now.
And this last publication before he died concerning the Jews and their lies is abysmal. That doesn't mean everything he did was wrong and every Lutheran should be pilloried in the street. It just means that a good guy who had a lot of good ideas had a bad one, and the bad ones just keep coming back. Just before Jesus left, the burning question on the hearts of the men around him: are you going to restore Israel? Are you going to do that? So let me just say that what was supposed to be our first session was, there were 3 reasons I think Israel matters. I think it matters to God. I think it's a proxy war for something else. And I think that if we go back to that, it's a disaster. So let me end this with a story, and then I'll do the other stuff I was supposed to be doing now. I've torn down someone's framework. I've said that what they're saying is not true. But I would be remiss if I didn't build a framework in its place. See, I don't believe that modern education is about destroying everything that's happened up till now and telling you why your parents were really stupid. I think modern education ought to be about constructing truth. So let me offer a story. I want to go back in time before there was time. The Bible is a romance book. It's a relationship book. The center of the story is two marriages. And I think if you look at it, in the beginning, God created a world. We don't know why, he never told us, but he created a world that was what we would call a world of angelic beings. They're not like us, but they have some things in common with us. They preceded us. They don't marry. They're not given in marriage. They can't procreate. I think I can make the case very carefully going through the Bible that the angels don't really understand sex at all. They don't get the whole thing. And that whole appeal doesn't make sense to them. And they don't really understand a lot of what's going on in relationships on the earth, even though they're called to come and represent God in different settings in biblical texts. But God decided to make a myriad of angels. He put them in 4 levels: cherubim, seraphim, archangel, angels. And he flung them out into the space around him in a spiritual dimension. Not this kind of dimension, something that is different than ours mathematically. It exists, it's real, but like the digital video material that's floating through this room right now that you can't see without a receiver, so there are other dimensions. You don't perceive them, but they are real. And I say that God then made this choice to create. And one of those created beings decided that he would stand in opposition to God. One close to the throne of God, Lucifer, decided he would rebel. And when he rebelled, he peeled off and took 1/3 of the angelic host with him. The other 2/3, in my apocryphal way of telling the story, came to God and said, "God, what are you going to do? Look at them, they're leaving. What are you going to do about it?" He said, "Wait, I got a story I want to tell you." I don't know if angels sit down, but if they do, he said, "Okay, everybody sit down, let me tell you a story." And he decided to take the finger he doesn't have in the spirit, he's the spirit, whips up a cosmos, 1 quintillion stars, throws it out into the heavens like a great canopy, and then begins to spin planets around these little constellations and stars. And in one particular star he called our sun, he put some rocks floating around, and on the 3rd rock away from that sun, he decided to create a little island with a garden. Don't go looking for the Garden of Eden today. There's been a major disruption and a flood that pretty much rearranged all the furniture. Here's what I can tell you. In that garden, God threw the doors open and allowed the enemy to slither in and suck the heart of man and woman that were created in that garden to follow and walk with God away. And the rest of the angels all said, "God, look what's happening. You've let in the back door. You need to do something." He said, "Wait, I'm telling a story. It's my story. Let me just listen to my story." And God created out of that a group of people that grew in mutiny against him. And then he structured that community by language and nation and tongue at the Tower of Babel and scattered them throughout the earth. And then he chose one of those nations, one nation, and said, "I want to bequeath myself to her as her husband. I'm plagiarizing Hosea is what I'm doing right now. I want Israel to be my wife, says the Father in heaven." The problem is that some wives don't get it and some husbands don't get it. And in this case, the wife took off and tried to find love in lots of other places, but not in the arms of the one who loved her. So God finally said, "I've got to divorce her. I've got to put her out. She cannot act like this and be my wife." And he goes to divorce her, but not until they have a child together. This is Revelation 12. They have a child, Israel and the father have a son. And that son grows up. And at a certain point, the Son was given the command to go out into the world and choose his own wife. But the bride of Christ is not the bride of the Father. It's two different stories. The bride of Christ was chosen not from one nation, not from one man, not from one loins and line, but from many nations, many peoples, many kindreds, many tongues. He was to choose a people that was not a people and make them into a people, Ephesians said. And when he did that, we today who know Jesus Christ are not the bride of Christ. We're the betrothed. We're waiting for the wedding. And Jesus said, I'm going away. I'll prepare a place for you, and if I go, I'll come again to receive you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. And one day soon, Jesus will come back. But during this time, the bride of the Son is supposed to be so living, such an example, that the estranged bride of the Father is jealous of the marriage relationship. And the estranged bride of the Father says, that's what it means to be a bride. One day soon, a trumpet sounds. The bride of the Son is called up to the wedding feast, and God turns his attention back to his estranged bride on earth. A pummeling occurs on the earth of 7 long years trying to get the estranged bride of the Father to bend her neck and finally cry out that she needs him and not the rest of the world. And nobody loves her like he does. And during those 7 long years of tribulation, finally she is surrounded by the nation's armies. Her back is to the sea. She has no escape. And coming in the clouds is the newly married Son, with his bride coming behind him to rescue the estranged bride of the Father. And at the end, she becomes once more reconciled to her husband. And you have the Son and the church, his bride, and the Father and Israel, his bride, and both brides, 2 marriages. That's the end of the Bible. Now that story was told in very graphic terms. In the Bible, a marriage is the place where God shows the highest unity that you can have. Harlotry is the definition of somebody wants the friends with benefits, where they get the idea of the unity without the responsibilities of the unity. And so harlotry is the language, it's a sexual language, but it's a language of idolatry, of putting my hope anywhere else. And my argument is this: the construct of the Bible is not that there's one marriage, but that there's 2. And the construct of the Bible is not that the Father has replaced his bride with a new bride. It's that his Father has chosen the Son to have a bride of his own, to be an example to get his bride back. It's true. God divorced Israel in Amos. It's very true. In Hosea, you have all the makings of this. But it's also true to say that in every one of those passages, it was so that he would eventually win her back. It is also true that that Romans chapter 11 says, and so all Israel will be saved. At that moment, surrounded by the nations, when they look up, everyone alive at that moment, not the one who died the day before, but everyone alive at that moment will look on him whom they have pierced, drop to their knees, and confess that he is their Lord. But it's going to take them a pummeling of 7 years to get there. And I am not fond of standing in front of any room in Jerusalem and saying, you think you've had it rough in the past? If I read Revelation literally, the future's worse than the past. But I'm here to tell you that it's not the job of the church to tell you how they feel about the story. It's the job of the church to report the story as God said it. Because the nature of Revelation is to reveal, and the purposes of God are deeper than I can know. He is God, and I am not. I think that Israel's important in God's economy for that reason. Now, if you'll allow me to let your mind slip over to a second session, I'm going to give you all of 2 minutes, and we're going to have to do we got some technical thing they have to do up here to change that session, and then I'm going to run over to that next one. Okay? So mingle amongst yourselves there for a minute.
Oh, Randy, that hurt. Oh, I can't believe he said that. In my article, I fast forward to the 23-minute mark because that's where this happens. That was so bad. Let me get into the reasons why that was so bad. And at the 23-minute mark, he says the center of the story is two marriages. That statement went right over my head. I had never heard that before, and it didn't make a lot of sense to me. And as many times happens, something doesn't make sense and it kind of goes over your head. And it could have been a discussion about how the unsaved are married to Satan, or some such thing. So I didn't flinch. Then he goes on to speak about God creating the universe and the earth, but just uses the term God. It's okay. Then he speaks about God choosing one nation. Chinese air. And speaking about God, saying, I want to bequeath myself to her as her husband. That statement is fine because it is a reflection of Hosea, as he talks about, and it's a symbolism also used in the New Testament. So there's no reason to object until the 27-minute mark, where he says, I want Israel to be my wife, says the Father in heaven. That statement didn't make me squawk, but it should have. I was too caught up in the flow of his story, and I was too used to people making these kinds of errors that are usually minor. They don't really understand the difference between the Son and the Father, and it's a mystery. And it also means that Dr. Smith is, I don't know, maybe not thinking clearly on this or whatever. At least that's how my mind was when I was listening. After all, it's God the Son that is and was the Creator, not God the Father. Just read John chapter 1 if you're confused. To make it more clear, let me say Jesus Christ, and it's in all capital letters, Jesus Christ is the Creator. It's actually important that you get that. Then at the 27-minute and 48-second mark, I heard something that almost made me jump out of my chair, and yes, there was yelling. Lots. Dr. Smith said, the bride of Christ is not the bride of the Father. He goes on from there to elaborate on what he said, but it was just insult added to injury. In fact, there are statements that he continued to make that caused me to wail in shock, horror, and anguish. The pain was pretty much over by the 31-minute and 50-second mark. He said that there are two marriages. I can't tell you how upset that makes me. I could jump up and down and give a demonstration, but I'm not going to. I don't want to have to replace that camera or this camera. It is certainly not what the Bible says. It is not what the Bible teaches, but I understand that he must say this. Why? Because you don't get a pre-tribulation rapture if you don't say that. In fact, if you don't say that, you can't have dispensationalism. But there are gigantic problems with this, and I can only address a few of them. This digression really isn't the point of the article. The first problem, what about those who were before Abraham? Under this idea, they aren't in the bride of the Father, as he would refer to it. Are they just castaways? Does just everybody before Abraham, did they just all go to hell? Remember that the father-in-law of Moses was a priest of Midian, and Moses did not reject him. Likewise, Balaam, the son of Beor, was a prophet of God. A wicked prophet, but he was still a prophet of God and not an Israeli. Does this tell you that there were people before Abraham that walked with God? Of course. Of course it does. They eventually died out until only Israel had the way of salvation. But the point is that there cannot be two marriages. Sorry. Second problem. Nothing is said in the Bible about two marriages. Remember, he calls himself a literalist. Randy, please. You said you're a literalist. Follow that, please. Yes, there are places in the Bible that speak of marriage. Lots of places. But that does not mean that there are two marriages. In fact, if we were to count up all the times which marriage is mentioned, we'd have lots of marriages. So that can't be it. There's not two marriages. Furthermore, the idea of marriage is a metaphor, just as the references to us being priests and kings in the New Testament. Yes, Paul speaks of us judging angels. But that doesn't change the fact that these are metaphors. There's some reality to it, but they're still metaphors. The third problem, Paul does not speak of a previous marriage. This connects with probably the single biggest problem that I have with dispensationalism. It raises the Mosaic covenant, the covenant that was given by Moses, through Moses, to be equal to the covenant made at the cross. This is anathema to me and a truly horrifying idea. Just read Galatians. It is chock full of references to the inadequacy of the Mosaic covenant and how God did not intend that the old covenant, it was an introduction to the new covenant. It refers to the purpose of the old covenant as one that leads us to Christ. Not to the Father. In fact, it is Christ who introduces us to the Father. Before, we didn't have access to the Father before Christ. And now he's saying that it is to the Father? Paul does not speak of a previous marriage, and that the old covenant is he doesn't say that it's the bride of the Father. Not in any way. Part of the problem, I think, of all my shock is I did not grow up being taught dispensationalism. So I did not know its tenets and all the reasons why it is wrong. So this has been an eye-opening experience. I had no idea that they believed in two marriages. I'm really shocked by this, since the Bible is clear that the center of everything is Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. And it's clear that Jesus was and is the creator of heaven and earth. I mean, there are so many things in the Bible that this fights against. I am aghast. I'm shocked to hear it. I can hardly believe it. If you take the time to examine the identity of God in the Old Testament, you will find out that this person is God the Son. Everywhere, always. This point was brought home to me in a sermon by my pastor in Jerusalem, who also happens to be a dispensationalist. Pastor Minnow Kalisher did a presentation called Jesus in the Old Testament at the 2002 Winnipeg Prophecy Conference. And you can find it at www.thebereancall.org content/Jesus-Old-Testament. I listened to, and I have a link in the article, so please go there. I'll also provide the link below in the comment section or below this video. I listened to a recording of that presentation, and it knocked my socks off. It was utterly magnificent, and it demonstrated with absolute and fantastic clarity that every time you see God in the Old Testament, it is the pre-incarnate Jesus Christ. Every single time. Now, does it mean, by the way, that God the Father can't, or maybe, whatever? If you find a place where God the Father appears, it doesn't invalidate this. The point is, the pre-incarnate Jesus Christ is everywhere in the New Testament. Old Testament, in the New Testament. Therefore, there can be no marriage of the Father. There can be no bride of the Father. It also means that there can be no dispensationalism. You cannot be a dispensationalist when you see that the whole Bible has been about bringing us to the cross. And if you are a dispensationalist, you are forced to claim that the cross was not necessary for Israel. Seriously. And many people have said this. Many people have said, John Hagee has said that Jesus was not the Messiah for Israel. That is a horrendous thing to say. What a horrible thing. It is only through Jesus Christ that the prophecies of the salvation of Israel will be fulfilled. Israel, all Israel, will join themselves into the body of Christ as the bride of Christ, as we are. But let me get back on script. I know that dispensationalists shy away from saying all that, and I am relieved that they do. It's blasphemy. Without the cross, those in the Old Testament died and went to hell. Without the cross, following the law of Moses was a waste of time, and so therefore they needed the cross, and they had it. The death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ is everything. Remember, when Jesus died on the cross, he didn't just die for you and me, he also died for them. When they obeyed God in the Old Testament, they were in obedience and in covenant relationship with God and in connection to Jesus Christ on the cross. Remember, Jesus called himself the Alpha and the Omega, which is a part of the Omega of Omega Shock. The beginning and the end. There is no other Alpha and there is no other Omega. Please, I'm sorry, I'm shouting here. Please, if you are a dispensationalist, think this through. If you want to stay a dispensationalist, just stop that part. I don't know what you have to do. Look at the pattern of the Bible. Look at how God was bringing his people to the cross, to his burial, to his resurrection. Please, if you love God, think this through carefully. Yes, I know this is hard, and John, the disciple, acknowledged this when he said, quote, "Whosoever denieth the Son, the same hath not the Father. He that acknowledgeth the Son hath the Father also." Close quote. This is 1 John 2, verse 23. It's all a mystery, and I believe that this mystery is a part of what the great angel of Revelation 10 said here, and it's quote, "But in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished, as he hath declared to his servants the prophets." Close quote. Revelation 10:7. I'm making this point is that if at least you acknowledge that Jesus Christ is God, if you don't understand the Father and you don't understand the Trinity, you still have the Father in the Trinity because you've acknowledged Jesus Christ. That is 1 John 2:23. You're still fine if you have Jesus as God. Diminish Jesus as God, you're not fine. Moving on. That's right. The mystery of God will be finished at Revelation 10:7. The confusion of the Trinity and why Jesus is the Creator and why the Father knew things that Jesus did not know, all of that will be over when the seventh trumpet sounds. When what I believe to be the last trump of 1 Corinthians 15:52. Although I can't be completely firm on that. But it sounds like that's what that is. So please, do not be a literalist. Do not insert into the Bible what it does not say. And it does not say that there are two marriages and that God the Father has the first one. It does not say that there will be a pre-tribulation rapture. There's no verse in the Bible that says that there's a pre-tribulation rapture. If you can show me one, I'll kiss your feet. I'll buy you lunch. Please. I mean, I don't want to go through the tribulation. So please, just stick with what the Bible actually says, not with what you think that it says. Now, does this mean that Pastor Smith is a bad guy and a horrible Christian? Absolutely not. Please remember that I knew all the above before I sat down to write and before I sat down to speak all this. When I said, remember what I said before, quote, I'm quoting myself here, "In fact, if I was looking for a church to attend, I would stop looking when I hit his church. He's that good." Close quote. John Little. The pastor that we have here currently is a pre-tribber. The previous pastor that we had here in Taiwan is a pre-tribber. My favorite pastor of our home church is a pre-tribber. I don't think he believes in two marriages. And you can, by the way, you can quote me on this. Seriously, pastors like Randall Smith are hard to find. He's such a good guy. And every pastor makes mistakes and gets things wrong. If I have to hold his feet to the fire over this and cast him out because he's wrong about this or that and the other thing, what about me? Because I know I've got to be, I'm sure I'm wrong about something. So I don't hold this against him. However, he's still wrong in this, and this is the kind of wrong that will get you in trouble with when Gog and Magog comes. In fact, error always leaves you vulnerable. I can attest to this personally. So in the words of Paul Benson, who shares my view on dispensationalism, let's get it right. And yes, that's a link. By now, some of you will feel a bit put off by this discussion of dispensationalism. And this will make you reluctant to watch those two videos. And I want to say that I'm sorry about that, because that's not my intention. Please do not miss this opportunity to learn about the importance of Israel to God. So let me bring you back to what I first said. In fact, if you want to ignore my outrage, please do. This is serious stuff, and missing it will be a big problem for you. I got upset over 7 minutes or 8 minutes. And if I threw out the rest of the videos because of those 8 minutes, that would be a shame. In fact, no, it would be a crime to your spiritual life. You must understand what Randy says here. Everything that I'm doing is about your spiritual and physical safety. Watching those two videos will help you with both. The anti-Semites are on the rise. The preterists, historicists, and amillennialists have crept into our churches, and you need a good defense. You must be able to defend yourself when they target you. And you will always be a target. Okay, let's move on to the analysis, and there's some of the stuff that I'm about to talk about that I could have written articles on just by themselves. So let's get to that. This one is a YouTube video, and it got me so mad. It's titled, "Corruption is Legal in America." If you want to know how vile, evil, and disgusting the American government is, just watch this. And if you've been a long-time reader, you've probably seen this a few years ago. You need to see it again. If you want to know why the American government is so vile, evil, and disgusting, watch this. In fact, watch it several times. This video describes the reason why America will have a military coup to take down the corruption in Washington, D.C. It also describes why America elected Donald Trump. It describes why America has been involved in so many senseless wars. It describes why America has become so evil. No, it does not mention those things. But what it says, well, it's the foundation for all of it. Oh, and let them do it. And we let them do it. So ultimately, it's our fault. Rage all you want at the political system and the vile and evil politicians, but look in the mirror before you do that. America was good once, with a golden chalice in her hand. Now she is a prostitute to the highest bidder. Think of the whore that rides the beast in Revelation. Think about that for a minute. The next one is titled, "Forget Flying Teslas. We'll be lucky if we can turn out Scythes." I don't know how to pronounce that word. In 20 years from now. From Zero Hedge. The core paragraph of this article is this one, quote, All the jabber is about trade and obstacles to trade, but the real action probably emanates from the energy sector, especially oil. The G7 nations are nothing without it, and the supply is getting sketchy at the margins in a way that probably and rightfully scares them. I'd suppose, for instance, that the recent run-up in oil prices from $40 a barrel to nearly $80 has had the usual effect of dampening economic activity worldwide. For some odd reason, the media doesn't pay attention to any of that, but it's become virtually an axiom that oil over $75 a barrel smashes economies, while oil under $75 a barrel crushes oil companies. While under $75 a barrel crushes oil companies. Close quote. And this paragraph might even be more important. Quote, shale oil is not a miracle so much as a spectacular stunt. How to leverage cheap debt for a short-term bump in resource extraction at the expense of a future that will surely be starved for oil. Now that the world is having major problems with excessive debt, it is also going to have major problems with oil. The quarrels over trade arise from this unacknowledged predicament. There will be less of everything that the economically hyperdeveloped nations, stumbling over my words, want and need, including capital. So what's shaping up is a fight over the table scraps of the banquet that is shutting down. So yes, in 20 years, we'll be lucky if we will have enough energy to produce enough metal to make the farm tools that we used 300 years ago. And it is all, and just remember, and I love how he says this, about shale oil is not a miracle so much as a spectacular stump? He said stump? No, shale oil is not a miracle so much as a spectacular stunt. How to use cheap debt for a short-term increase in resource extraction at the expense of our future. This is going to be terrible. When the bond market crashes, when rates have to rise to realistic and natural levels, it's going to show how much oil we really can get. And speaking of that, I did a little temporary thing about its peak oil, titled, It's Crazy, Texas Roiled by Unprecedented Labor Shortage as Shale Industry Hires Just About Anyone. Since the price of oil popped up to $80 a barrel, the oil companies have gone nuts, sort of like what they did in 2007. It's interesting how that worked out for all of us. And the worst joke of all is that the oil companies still won't be making any money on this. But that, my friends, is truly dark humor. And just remember, what happened in 2007? The price of oil went up, and our economy died. Next, Trump slams OPEC again, demands lower prices. Oil prices are too high. OPEC is at it again from Zero Hedge. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that OPEC can increase production, and OPEC is afraid to let this fact out. I don't know for certain that OPEC is at their limits of production, but I'm betting that they are really, really close. Guys, please. There isn't any oil company out there, if they're willing to tell you the truth, that is denying peak oil. The only thing that they're telling you is that peak oil is a little further ahead. They keep going a little further ahead. It's not here yet. I'm sorry. Peak oil has already happened. All that we're working on now is a bit of methamphetamine and heroin in our bloodstream. When that runs out, we're going to die. But let's move on to the Bilderberg meeting that we had just this past week. This one is something unprecedented is happening at Bilderberg 2018. It's a YouTube video. Melissa and Aaron of Truth Stream Media are anti-Semites. They probably don't think of themselves that way. But whenever someone is anti-Israel, I'm sorry. You're an anti-Semite. So you can't trust their analysis. But you might be able to trust some of their observations. And on this 66th meeting of Bilderberg on the 6th month, which kind of looks like 666, it looks like they are planning for war, among other things. Now, just do not allow Melissa and Aaron to color your view of Israel. They are being Israel is being manipulated just like everyone else. And I get really, really tired of anti-Semites. But here's the next one. Will Bilderberg still be relevant as the future of war is transformed? And this is from The Guardian of all places. I'm not used to having The Guardian back up a point like this, but it is more and more clear that this year's Bilderberg meeting is all about war. They brought in generals, they brought in heads of military organizations, the head of NATO, intelligence officials, into their Bilderberg meeting. And every time something like that happens, war comes after. Now here's another one. Now, this is an interesting question. This is titled, Why is Cardinal Parolin attending a Bilderberg group meeting? Actually, the bigger question is, why wouldn't the Vatican have a representative at Bilderberg? I would be curious about Vatican involvement over the years. It's interesting, curious to see the results of Bilderberg meetings, if we could just be a fly on the wall at Bilderberg. But this time the Vatican was openly invited, and I wonder why. Now here we have a little treat for you, and I find this to be interesting. Also, actually interesting just by itself. This video is just by itself interesting. And it's called The Flat Earth Crushed by Discovery Channel. It's a YouTube video. In addition to completely destroying the insane flat earth theory, this is also an interesting look at how water, even water, follows the curve of the earth. I experienced this several times taking a catamaran over the horizon, and on a separate occasion almost getting myself killed because I violated an important rule in scuba diving. When underwater, always be aware of where the current is pulling you. Always. And yes, there's an underwater current. And it almost got me killed. The interesting thing, and the point of why I am putting this here, is that flat earthers will still refuse to accept this evidence, which I find to be hilarious. No matter what you do, no matter what proof you offer, they will still believe that the earth is flat. And yes, this 8.5-minute video crushes the flat earth theory, but flat earthers will not accept it. I find that to be incredibly fascinating. It's a mental disease that I would love to study more thoroughly, but it would probably damage my vocal cords. Why? Because I would probably spend a lot of time screaming, yelling, and jumping up and down in outrage and disbelief. So it would be best if someone else examines this mental disease. Again, the biggest issue of all is that we are all vulnerable to this disease in one way or another, if you are not careful. There are a host of belief systems that are just like the flat earth mentality, and believers in those systems exhibit the very same insane characteristics as the deranged flat earthers. I myself have fallen prey to this kind of mentality, and it took me years for God to extricate me from its grip. So this is a very personal issue with me. And no, I was not a flat earther. I've talked about this before, I've had other problems. Years ago, you could have provided proof after proof, but it would not have changed my view on landmarkism, hyper-Calvinism, and a particularly horrible form of legalism. I was stubborn and completely unwilling to even consider any proof that I was wrong. Any. And yes, Mrs. Little understands that. Just saying. The same goes for a host of people who passionately hold views that are completely and utterly wrong. No matter what you say and no matter what proof you offer, they will not accept the fact that they are wrong. Anti-Semites, communists, Catholics, Jehovah's Witnesses, dispensationalists, preterists, evolutionists, atheists, Muslims, tree huggers, earth Nazis, Al Gore, and too many others are so blinded by the lies that they love that they will not let go of them. They love their lies too much to see the truth. And I call them all flat earthers, even though they do not believe that the earth is flat. They have a flat earth mentality, so they are flat earthers in my view. Yes, if you're a communist, you're a flat earther. If you're a preterist, you're a flat earther. If you're an anti-Semite, you're a flat earther. You may not believe that the earth is flat, but you got the same mentality. Now, for those who are literally flat earthers, if you can still be a flat earther after watching this video, get out of my sight. Your love of lies is a demonic abomination. And yes, I continue to get lots of email from flat earthers. Seriously. I'm not going to show you, no. And I routinely have to let them either give me a picture of the edge of the earth or shut up. And yes, I have a cousin who works near the South Pole, okay? And he's a good guy. He's not going to lie to me. Seriously, how can people be so stupid? As Greg Hunter says, it's just too stupid to be stupid. Then there's this. This is about a Revelation. This next one is about Revelation 17 verses 16, 17, and 18. It's titled, If a Nuclear Bomb Was Detonated in New York City by the Organic Prepper. It's actually Daisy Luther. This article reminded me of the beast rider, the whore that rides the beast in Revelation 17. Beast rider is my name for this woman, but Revelation calls her a whore who rides the beast. And remember what I said about America, and this goes for New York City. In fact, I will quote the last 3 verses of Revelation 17, which starts with 16. These 3 verses. Quote, And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Close quote. Revelation 17, verses 16 through 18. Don't stop at those 3 verses. Read all of Revelation 17, but think of those 3 verses as you do. I provide a link to the whole chapter. Oh, and notice how she is destroyed. Fire. And they do it. Yes, the horns. Yes, I know that they eat her flesh, and I'm not sure how they would do that, but I know what fire is. And what better way to burn her than a nuclear weapon? Although it doesn't need to be nuclear. Now, why did this article spark my interest? Because it refers to New York City. And why New York City? Because of what that last verse of Revelation 17 says. The woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Right now, that city is New York City. All foreign currency transactions, or almost all, in the world flow through New York. And if New York doesn't like what you are doing, they can turn off your ability to interact with other banks, even with other banks in your own country. Just ask Russia. That's a lot of power, and the world doesn't like this fact that New York has this much power over them. Will another city rise and take the power that New York City has, and will she become the whore instead of New York City? Who knows? Maybe. But for now, I'd have to say that city is New York City. It's the most powerful city in the world right now. After that, I actually provide a link to the video. And it's an excellent video that I found on Zero Hedge that goes along with the article. It's actually titled, "What Happens When a Nuclear Bomb Hits?" If you remember my scenario of hiding a bomb within a big air conditioning unit at the top of a big skyscraper in New York, you might think about that as you look at that video. That will do a lot more damage than a similar bomb going off at ground level. Now, of course, by now, if you don't know that Tommy Robinson has been unceremoniously arrested and thrown in jail illegally, you've been living under a rock or been watching mainstream media. What the UK did to Tommy Robinson just about 3 weeks ago is sick and twisted. He did not break the law in any way, and his summary imprisonment is a vile and evil act of a psychopathic judge and a psychopathic government. Worse, Tommy will probably be murdered in jail, and that murder will be on the hands of the British government and on the judge who put him in jail. More importantly, it's a symbol and a symptom of what is happening, first in the UK and then elsewhere. Welcome to the pathological, psychopathic, diabolical Islamization of your country, wherever you are. Well, the first article for this week on what has been happening to Tommy is from Katie Hopkins. It's a huge Free Tommy rally in London. Hashtag Free Tommy. This is the third week of Tommy Robinson's unjust incarceration. Worse is a death sentence. And the foul judge who ordered it knew that it was a death sentence. And when Tommy is murdered, the UK government will have created a martyr. The UK and the rest of Europe are leading the way. To those of you there who are pushing back, you have my respect and admiration. But the uphill battle that you are fighting, well, I just don't know how you will win. It really is almost or already too late. To those of you in the U.S., this is the future, so watch carefully. How utterly insane and horrendous. The next one is, watch as chaos erupts at Tommy Robinson protest. Police chase down streets as thousands rage, from Zero Hedge. Now this is what I am glad to see. Hopefully these people will keep the pressure up. If they don't, Tommy has little hope of survival. And if this is not kept up, the UK doesn't have a hope either. Then it's marching for terrorism in London? No problem. If you are Tommy Robinson, you are thrown in jail for an opinion about Islam, just for telling people what you think about Islam. But if you encourage people to kill Jews and Israelis, you can gather in the thousands and march down the street. Notice a problem here? Now, this next one is an update. Tommy Robinson receiving death threats in new UK prison. Imam orders hit on Tommy Robinson with video. The dirtbags who put Tommy Robinson in prison transferred Tommy Robinson to a prison where 71% of the prisoners are Muslim. I'm not sure how that figure was determined, but if it's true, this is murder. By the way, one of the reasons why I am less than enthusiastic about validating this figure is the source. Kaylin Robinson. He's a weasel, and you should double check everything that unmentionable says. Hopefully he isn't lying through his teeth, or maybe we should hope that he's lying through his teeth. Actually, I kind of hope that he's lying through his teeth, because I don't want Tommy Robinson to be where he is, but apparently he's not lying. This next one is YouTube. Tommy Robinson's life is in danger. They want him dead. This is yet another hard-hitting analysis. And yes, the UK government wants Tommy Robinson dead because he had the audacity to expose what was actually going on. I keep saying this, but it is so utterly horrifying that any democratic government would do this. How dare they do this? How is this possible? A democracy? If you want a country ruled by law, do not live in Britain. Well, that's it for now. I truly hope that you're ready for all the things that we have talked about today. As it says in Proverbs 22:3, a prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. And as I always say at the end of all of my articles, if you find a flaw in my reasoning, have a question, or wish to add your own viewpoint, leave a comment in the comment section below or on the website. Your input is truly welcome, and I have really gotten some great comments from people. I value your input, and I have actually been inspired by many things. After all, remember, this whole thing, this video started out talking about someone who sent me a video. Someone named Karen who sent me a video that inspired me to sit down and write and then speak. You can get and again, you'll find my articles on omegashock.com, and please feel free to sign up for the newsletter at theshockletter.com. I send out these shock letters every Friday evening my time, and of course we don't reach you on Friday morning Eastern Standard Time. So then this is John Little. I'm John Little, and this has been the ShockCast for a dark Saturday evening, June 16th, 2018.